Hello and welcome to another episode of Casting Views, the podcast that takes a subject each week and, as the name suggests, cast views. This week is an episode I've been waiting for a long time since I approached these guests. I've been so excited about getting them together on my pod. I've got Antonio from the Cultworthy and the Milf and me, and I've got 7Cs from No on 15. Hi guys, how you doing?
Hello, doing great.
Yeah, doing great, man. Thank you for having us.
I've been so looking forward to this. So I'm going to start with you, 7Cs. Your first time appearance on here, but I was on your show, was it a couple of months back now?
Yeah, we did the Back to the Future episode. But yeah, no, thank you for having me on. I'm the host of the No on 15 Allcast. We talk about movies from the 80s, 90s, and today. We do, a dive into those films. And sometimes we review other stuff like comic books or TV shows. But for the most part, we do series-based episodes. So usually there will be, either on a theme or either a type of genre. So yeah, that's what we do. And we try to have fun when we do it. So definitely a blast when you guys are on too.
You definitely have fun listening to it. It's very easy listening, and it was so great to be able to do Back to the Future. I mean, one of my all-time faves as well, so that was great fun.
Well, he gets to play games and quizzes and those 30-second challenges too on his show. Like sometimes I feel I should be more interactive, but I think that they do it really well over there, so I wouldn't want to compete.
It's a secret, Antonio.
With the Wheel of Names, which fell on me, I was so lucky to be able to be picked for that.
Yeah, it was kind of on purpose, but it's always fun to do that because it's we do a quick challenge to everyone that comes on the show, especially if it's your first time, and it's always fun to see how people describe a film in 30 seconds. Because it's difficult unless you write it out ahead of time, to kind of freestyle it and try to like get the points across of what it might be. It's almost impossible, but it's fun just to see people, ramble through it. It's good.
I've never rehearsed so many versions of something in my life as I did for that.
That's why yours sounded so good, huh? No, it's good.
Welcome to the show. Like I said, I've been really looking forward to repaying the favour back for you. We move on to Antonio. I keep saying it, the busiest man. So you've currently got technically 3 podcasts at the moment that are airing. And I think it's okay to announce it now because I think Justin's mentioned it. And I think you mentioned you've got another one on the way, haven't you?
Yeah, in January, we're going to have a 4th podcast that Justin and I have collaborated on. And we're not going to like announce it quite yet because we're going to have like a trailer of what it really is. But it's a movie-based podcast for sure. And we're looking forward to it. And yeah. Busy.
Yeah, you guys complement each other really well, man. Great choice.
Talking of Justin, I woke up this morning to an email from him with some absolutely fantastic artwork for this episode, which I can't wait to go out. And you, honestly, to those listening, Antonio and 7Cs haven't seen these, but I have. And I actually showed a couple of people at work and they just burst out laughing in a good way, at me, obviously.
Right.
I think this is probably some of the best ones he's done. That's all I'm saying.
Great.
And Antonio, Milf and me and Cultworthy, obviously going very well at the moment.
Yeah, I'm actually recording 2 episodes of Milf and me after we're done here. And Season I literally just finished recording an episode on the movie Go before we jumped onto this one. So yeah, that's my day.
Yeah, a lot of fun.
Yeah, and this is pod 3 of 4 for me this week.
Yeah, I guess you have one tomorrow too. So this is 2 and I got 3. Yeah. I feel you guys.
Yeah, I've got one Sunday. I'm recording another Who's Coming to Dinner, which Antonio kind of was the inspiration for that one as well. Turned that into a mini series. So I've got December's guests being recorded Sunday. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Before we get into the subject, we're going to hear a trailer, and it is the No on 15. So sit back, listen to that, and then we'll get straight into it.
No, I'm 15. No, I'm 15. No, I'm 15. No, I'm 15.
So, what's our show about? It's about some dudes talking about movies, just like this.
With Goofy screaming with them.
So you're talking that they should have replaced it like with a Tom and Jerry scream or something like that?
Tom and Jerry scream.
Or you might hear something like this.
Oh my gosh.
That whole movie, waiting to see what happens with Blanca, is like the most aggravating thing in that film. But for the most part, we talk movies from the 80s, 90s, and today. And if you grace us with your ear time, you might hear one of these 30-second gems like this.
Yeah, I was gonna say I did not get a
watch
chance to watch this one this week.
Give it to him anyways.
We're
Let him
going to give it to you, Bert, anyway. You ready?
I'm gonna give you the 30-second review of Tron Uprising.
All right. Start the clock and then. So give us a shot and listen to the No on 15 Allcast wherever you listen to your podcasts.
No, I'm 15.
Right, so we are back, and this is an episode. I remember, Antonio, you mentioned this to me 6, 7, 8 months ago, and I wrote it on the board. And I thought when we come to do it, I'd always want 2 monumental movie maestros to be on this. So I've got you two. I've got you two on here to be just that. I'm going to kind of just sit back and just enjoy the conversation between the two of you, I think. The episode is casting changes. So, yeah, in films, just exactly what it says on the tin, casting changes. And I loved it so much because it's a play on my pod title. So I have got a number of things that I want to hear, but I'm going to always hand it over to guests. So I think, Antonio, actually, what was it? What is it? Something that you've always been interested in terms of this kind of subject, or some of the previous example in history?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've mentioned it on your show before and on mine. When I first discovered your show, I thought Casting Views was a podcast about casting actors in movies and your views on how they were cast. And I'm like, oh no, it's not. It's casting topical views on topical subjects. But that's kind of why I mentioned it to you almost a year ago now. Where it's like, yeah, well, wouldn't it be cool if we did an episode about that, about my original idea of what your show was? Because when you get into film and cinema and development hell projects like I do, and I'm sure C's has, you'll see that there are so many changes in movies from the initial idea to the script, test screenings, that they'll change actors, they'll change directors, they'll change the setting of the movie all the time. Like I would honestly say that whatever you see on the screen in the theater and eventually on the TV is probably at least 60% different than the original idea of what the film was supposed to be. And that could be script, that could be director, that could be setting, and I think most commonly actors and actresses and performers, where, hey, so and so just doesn't work out, let's replace them, let's change it up, let's pay them off of their contract. And yeah, we're gonna talk about some hopefully interesting ones. I've got a bunch. I don't know what C's has got, but the ones that have always been itching me of like, I want to be in that parallel universe where people actually got to play these roles and see what they actually ended up being like. So I'm looking forward to this.
See, how about you as a subject? Because I approached you once I'd been on yours, I thought this would be a perfect opportunity to get you on here, and you kind of jumped at it as well. So is it something that you've kind of, because you've done a number of films and a number of films where we know there's some famous changes. Has it something that's always been around your mind?
Oh, definitely. I would say, like Antonio said, probably way more eloquently than I will say. But I think, you always have that curiosity, even if you're not looking at the film aspect of it. But let's say you're looking at a different media, like you're looking at a book, right? Or you have, comic books or, something else. It could be a story. That's not necessarily in a formal setting. Like you always have that thought to yourself, what if so-and-so was put in this part and cast to do it? Is that the right person? And that's those conversations are always interesting, especially if someone has like a pre-existing portfolio of work that they've done before. So you go to think, yeah, I don't know if they'd be right for that part, or I don't know if this person would be right for that part. But also getting into the conversation of productions have already started and they cast someone in those parts, and then those parts get replaced by someone else, like Antonio said, when it didn't work out. That stuff's really interesting just to hear about. Like, and then just, as human beings, we wonder stuff all the time. So like the wondering of if what this would have been like with this person doing it, you could apply that almost into anything, but when you apply it to film in general, it gets very interesting to talk about, just to think about too.
And I think there's a difference, and that's how I approached my list of there's always casting rumors or people being approached for a role. And then there's people who've actually signed on for a role. So everything that I'm going to mention today are people that actually signed on and potentially even started filming and then were changed. It wasn't like, oh, so and so's been offered. Well, anyone can get an offer. I'm
Right.
talking about the ones where actually ink was written on page and money transferred hands, and they were that part, and then they weren't. So
Yep. I'm with you. We'll probably have some overlap, so we'll take turns.
yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, I think we'll probably have some overlap. I've got two, like you said, that definitely cast. So that's why I'm more than happy to pass over to you. But before we do, a couple of things that you said. It's exactly that whole game about, oh, so and so was lined up to play it, and you say now, yeah, it wouldn't have worked. And it's like, well, you don't know because you've had 20, 30 years watching the film with that actor or actress
Mm,
in it. You just don't know what might have been. And yeah, Antonio, to go right back to what you said about film being potentially 60% different to what it was. It's amazing, isn't it? Because you watch a 90-minute film and you think, oh yeah, it's simple or straightforward screenplay. They just need to get the cast. But the amount of development hell we've heard about and those we don't know about, and like you said, the quite major changes to a script is just amazing. Kind of what goes on. The making of films, it can be just as interesting. And I haven't seen it yet, but there's a series on, is it Paramount? The making of The Godfather.
Hmm.
The fact that you've made a series out of a making of a film, how many more
mm-hmm.
franchises could you apply that to?
Oh, plenty, I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Okay, so let's get into it. And I think, Cez, I think we'll start with you as it's your first time on the show. I'd love to let you take the lead on this one.
Okay. So my first one, I'm gonna lean into the sci-fi, and it is the casting of James Remar as Corporal Hicks. I don't know if you know about this one, Antonio.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So he was originally cast to play Hicks in the Alien sequel that most people know. I think it was Michael Biehn who ended up really playing that part throughout the film. But I
Hmm.
guess at the time, he had a terrible drug problem, and after I think I don't even remember if it was that long that he was actually shooting. I think it was only like a couple weeks
It was like 2
before
weeks.
yeah, and then he got replaced. Cameron just said it wasn't working out, and he had a lot going on in his career and his personal life. But I don't know, man. I like James Remar, especially in the Warriors. He's great. He's even great in the horrible Mortal Kombat sequel that everybody hates as Raiden. But and Dexter, probably more people know him from Dexter. I think he's showing up in the Fast and Furious franchise. I like him, man, as an actor. As Hicks, I don't know. I don't know if it would have worked out, even if he would have went through and played it all the way.
Well, he definitely has the grunt attitude that Paul Reiser's character of Burke says. If you're thinking of a grunt in that movie, that's how he would have played it. By the
Mhm.
time Aliens came around, you have to remember he had already played the villain in 48 Hours. He had already played the villain in Band of the Hand. He was in a lot of
Yep.
Miami Vice episodes. Like Michael Mann liked to use him a lot. So he was already known for playing either like the sleazy guy or the villain. And to have him play a hero in this, I think it's interesting because he would have definitely bought that grunt mentality to it.
Yeah.
Where Michael Biehn is definitely more hero because he was the hero in Terminator,
Yep. Yeah, definitely.
This isn't one, that I kind of knew about or even came across in my research. I mean, is there a bit of a similarity between them? I can kind of see.
Well, Remar, like I said, he's definitely more aggressive and grunty and tough.
A little more gritty too, I would say.
He's definitely a little
right?
more gritty. I think that the chemistry between Sigourney Weaver and Michael Biehn plays a little bit more like they don't really play it as romantic, but there's definitely the chemistry there that they definitely understand each other and they're relying on each other for survival.
Right.
Where Remar's character, I feel one of the main traits of him in any movie, even like when he was in Sex in the City back in the 90s, is that he doesn't really have chemistry with anyone. So it makes him appealing, but at the same time, it's not something that friendships and relationships are built on. And that's kind of his bread and butter.
I would say that too. I would say that to me was odd as well, because I would think he comes across more as in his character work as someone that wants to think of only themselves. So to have like them be someone that respects Sigourney Weaver's Ripley character would be interesting. Yeah.
But he's still in the movie. Like, there's a lot of shots of, let's say, like his profile or him from behind that they didn't want to reshoot
Yeah.
with Michael Biehn. So he's still in a lot of the movie for sure.
Sure, I also saw something that Ripley wasn't initially going to be or intended to be Sigourney Weaver. Now, I know you said about that yours are strictly ones that have been cast, but I think I was reading that Meryl Streep. I think they were after Meryl Streep.
Well, originally that part was a man. Like the original
Mhm.
script by Dan O'Bannon, the entire crew was male. It wasn't until Ridley Scott came on that he's like, no, we need to have Ripley be a female because the horror of, let's say, penetration and gestation is a lot more
Right.
frightening for women. And the fact that it's men that get it in this movie and the female is a hero or the heroine, that's
Mhm.
like the
Right.
juxtaposition of it, which perfect. I mean, to me, like the top tier female action heroines of all time are always going to be Ripley and Sarah Connor. Like, it's going to be
Yeah.
tough to top those for me.
Yeah, pretty close.
Very solid start. Antonio, over to you.
So this one's always been funny to me because it's not that I wanted it to happen, it's that I'm amazed that it even happened and where it ended up. And that was in Tim Burton's Batman Returns. The character Robin was actually written into the script and would have had a pretty big role. But Burton decided, as they were like really leaning into production, that there were already too many characters. And I think that's one of the things that people say is a flaw of a lot of the Batman movies now is like you can't just have one villain, you have to have several. And technically that movie had three. You had Catwoman, you had the Penguin, and then you had Max Schreck, played by Christopher Walken. So yeah, there were already a lot of characters in the original script and in the production of it. They had Marlon Wayans, Damon Wayans' little brother.
That's right.
Wow.
He was cast and he was paid as Robin. And to even add to that, when Tim Burton still was going to be doing the third Batman movie, which became Batman Forever before Joel Schumacher took it over, that original cast was supposed to have been Robin Williams as the Riddler, Rene Russo as the female lead in that one instead of Nicole Kidman. And then they would have had Billy D. Williams reprise his Harvey Dent role from the first one as Two-Face.
Mm.
And then Robin would have been Marlon Wayans instead of Chris O'Donnell. The coolest thing about this, though, is that Marlon Wayans still got paid his full salary, which was like, I think, $1 million almost. And not only that, he still gets residuals from his contract of that movie that he never even starred in. But he was hired, he was written in, he was paid, he had a costume, and then they were just like, no, we're going to make it just Batman, and we'll save Robin for the third movie. So I think that's a really interesting casting, let's say, change, as in they removed him, and then in the next movies, they replaced him with white bread Chris O'Donnell.
Chris O'Donnell. I would say it's very poignant to mention that one because I would say Warner Brothers is still writing shit off like now. Yeah, like they just wrote off the Batgirl movie, right? Like they put that
Not
in the
only
vault.
that,
It's never coming out. But
I heard they deleted it. I heard they took it off the hard drives.
So it's like, yeah, they don't. It seems like they like burning money, man, and they do it for tax reasons. Maybe in this case, Marlon Wayans as Robin is that one is crazy to me. It's just the profile doesn't fit. It has to me it has nothing to do with like whether they're white or black. It's just I don't picture Robin being taller than Batman, especially with Michael Keaton's Batman.
Well, and also if it's Marlon Wayans, they're going to make him the comic relief. They were going to give him like all the jokes for sure. But you know what? At the same time, I have to think that there is something cool about like the progressiveness of Tim Burton at the time. I mean, remember when they cast Michael Keaton as Batman, there was no internet, but the world freaked out. Like if there was an internet back then, it would have been just a shit show, a nightmare. People were like, I'm boycotting this movie. You can't make Beetlejuice Batman.
Yes.
And now he's like everyone's favorite Batman for the most part. So I think there was part of that where Tim Burton's like, well, it worked with Michael Keaton. I put a comedian in the role of Batman. I can put a comedian in the role of Robin, and he's African American. it's kind of like a double down on that logic, but then they just decided to scrap it altogether.
Yeah.
Did you say it's a change of director potentially why he didn't return? Because it's funny if they've got him and he's filmed the role, and it's just that for whatever reason they thought it was just surplus to character requirement. Why he didn't come back for the third film? So I think it was a change in director, right?
Well, change in director, change in energy, but also they wanted to make everyone younger. So if you think about it, you've got an older cast in Burton's idea. You had, probably Michelle Pfeiffer might be even coming back as Catwoman. Who knows? But Rene Russo is, a good 15 years older than Nicole Kidman. Then you had Jim Carrey instead of Robin Williams. Like the idea was to make Batman less dark and more comical and like 90s neon. So that's what Joel Schumacher wanted to bring to it. So they just kind of aged everyone down a little bit.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of. I wonder how you feel about that. If you filmed roles, so you're still getting paid, you're still getting residuals, which is great. You've got the outfit. I mean,
Oh, I'm
which is
sure he's
cool.
fine with it.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Easiest paycheck ever, right?
Right. To go back for a second on Caesars, I'm not sure if you knew this, but Michael Biehn wasn't in Alien 3, and they used his likeness. They used a photo of him in the computer at the beginning of Alien 3 without his permission. So he sued them, and they ended up paying him. He got paid something like 30 times more just to have his picture in Alien 3 than his whole
Oh, wow.
performance in Aliens. So he was like, yeah, works for me.
Wow. And it's not like he didn't go on to carry on starring in stuff, right? So,
Indeed.
Likeness rights, man.
well, it's funny you say that. I mean, I'm going to go for the really easy and obvious one. I'm fine with that. So I'm going to go with Back to the Future.
I knew you would.
Yeah.
I did not say it because I was.
And also because it was the one I did on your show, C's, so I thought it's just a perfect
Mhm.
linking. But it is also one of the most famous ones, right? And I've recently, a little while ago, I bought a book on like the behind the scenes, etc. And they do quite a big chunk on it. And it
Mhm.
was Eric Stoltz, wasn't it? Who I think filmed for about 6 weeks, didn't he?
It was like 2/3 of the movie they shot.
Yeah. And there are images out there, and I think they've recently released some film. They say it was creative differences, don't they? And I think what I saw was that Stoltz wanted to play it more serious and more about
Mhm.
the consequences of time traveling than what they
Mhm.
want. And obviously, they then get Michael J. Fox, who I think they wanted at the start, and the rest, as they say, is history. Now, this is reminded me of something I did want to say in your kind of intro, Antonio. Is it an element of, well, I was going to say, is it bravery, or is it that they just know they want to make them as most money as they can? But do you think there's an element of bravery in calling that decision that far into filming and production, and saying, look, we're going to have to start from scratch?
Well, I think they had the money to do it, and that's the point. Uh, Marty McFly has to be a likable character, and that's what I've heard Zemeckis and Spielberg say is like, hey, we're not saying that Eric Stoltz wasn't a good actor. He just wasn't playing it likable. He was kind of a dick. He was kind of playing it as if it was such a burden to be in the future and adding a
Mm.
lot of dramatics to it. But the script is a sci-fi comedy, so you need to get the punchlines and the laughs. So it wasn't as much about like, hey, I think the thing that we have to remember too is they wanted Michael J. Fox in the beginning,
Right.
but he was under contract with Family Ties, so they couldn't get him. At least at the time they couldn't. So that's why they really went with Plan B, and Plan B was Eric Stoltz. And so if you can get your first option back on the table, and you feel like you have the talent and the resources to go back and reshoot, then yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I like C said, Warner Brothers has wasted so much money and talent and time just writing off movies. I would much rather have them spend a little bit of money and fix the problem and make a franchise that's, one of the most popular franchises ever than just make the movie go away, right?
Yeah. No, I agree. I think a lot of that was scheduling initially, but I think a lot of the time it's like a vision that you have, a creative vision that you have, like especially for something like this that's beloved. I'm sure they like Zemeckis and Spielberg knew ahead of time like what they could create with this, and that they needed to have. I think they had everything right except for that. and they
Yeah.
were probably seeing it like accumulate over weeks. After a couple more weeks, they're like, man, this isn't gonna work unless we get the right guy. So I think, unfortunately, and it's not a knock against Eric Stoltz. It's just some things fit better with other people. It's just how it
Mhm.
works.
Yeah,
you
no,
know?
absolutely. And I guess the only thing you've got to worry about is the chemistry then on screen. So if an actor's been acting with someone for 6 weeks, but I think the rumours were also that he did rub people up the wrong way on set,
Mm.
and I know Christopher Lloyd did have concerns, didn't he? Not that he didn't like Michael J. Fox, but that he'd have to build that kind of relationship up again. For me, one of the reasons why I love those films is the chemistry between them. And yeah, I mean, it was a great decision. Now, the thing about Back to the Future is it's kind of almost a 2-for-1 as well, because you've got the fact that they also replaced Crispin Glover, didn't they, after the first one, and all the trouble
Yeah,
that
part
brought.
two.
So yeah, so kind of what's your view on that in terms of sort of replacing the character? Because they tried to do something sneaky, right, didn't they? Or they tried to be clever about it, but subsequently then
Uh,
introduced sort of rules and lawsuits and kind of future legislation, didn't it? That case.
A little bit. That one's a little bit more challenging because there's two things involved on Crispin Glover's part. One, he's a psycho, but he's brilliant. But like he's difficult to work with. He's got a lot of weird traits and tendencies that make him who he is, So I don't think that's the problem. The problem is that he didn't get compensated very well for the first one, and his role is such a big part of the movie that in the second one there was a lot more for George McFly to do. So he thought he needed more money. He deserved more money. They didn't want to pay him that. So instead, they just didn't rehire him and then recast his character and shot him from like back angles, side angles. And then when he's an old man, did him like that. Where they got in trouble was they made his likeness too much like him, and the
Yeah.
vocal performance was too much like it. So he was able to successfully sue the studio for likeness rights, like C's was saying earlier, because it wasn't really the character. They were really making a caricature of him, and that's how he was able to get that lawsuit passed.
Yeah, I feel like that happens a lot. Well, it's happened recently, right? With Marvel, I think they recast a couple people, and DC's recasting all the people right now. So
Yeah, but they work that stuff into contracts now where they can't come back
yeah,
and sue. It's like, you can be replaced, you will be replaced. That was the problem, is that Crispin already had a first offer to return, and that's where things get in line. You know what? Another famous thing like that too was Billy D. Williams. Billy D. Williams got paid out
yeah,
huge for not being put as Two-Face in Batman Forever, because in his contract, his character was promised to come back in a sequel, and they paid him out on that one.
I do like it because I think both cases are really interesting in their own rights. In the end, I mean, at least the Michael J. Fox one did work for the film. So
There's a third part to that story that not a lot of people know about, and that there's another famous recasting of that same movie because of the Eric Stoltz recasting. That's the fact that we've had 3 different Jennifers,
right, of course, yes, yes, yeah.
mhm,
but a lot of people don't know
that's
about the first one. So when Eric Stoltz was in that part, they actually had another actress named Melora Hardin. Most people would know her as Jan from The American Office. She shot her entire role of Jennifer with Eric Stoltz. When they fired Stoltz and brought Michael J. Fox on, she's like 5 inches taller than Michael J. Fox, which isn't hard. Like the dude's 5'2" or something. So then they cast in Claudia Wells to play Jennifer, who's the
Yeah.
Jennifer we see in the first one. And then they recast her with Elizabeth Shue in the second 2 movies. So
Yep.
technically, we had 3 Jennifers in that movie as well.
I completely forgot about that. Well, I cast the one that happened in the films as him messing around with the timeline, so I justify that. So that's
There you
fine,
go.
right?
It makes sense.
Yeah, like I said, I know it's the obvious one, but it is a fun one. So, C's, over to you.
All right, I'm gonna go with the Lenina Huxley in Demolition Man.
Yeah.
So
Good one.
yeah, Lori Petty originally was cast to play Lenina Huxley, and I think she only filmed for a couple days in that role before Joel Silver decided to replace her. and then so I guess Petty and Silver they couldn't see eye to eye about the character, and I guess they said creative differences, which is something you kind of hear very much in the industry when something doesn't work out, and that's how we got Sandra Bullock in that role, and it was one of her breakout roles, so we'll go with that one.
So if you don't know who Lori Petty is, Dan, she was most known back for being in Point Break with Keanu Reeves, and then starring as Gina Davis's sister in A League of Their Own. But for me, she will always be Tank Girl.
Yeah, I remember her. I'm not going to say I've seen a lot of her stuff, but I definitely remembered her from back in the day. Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting too, because I've known about this one for a long time, where her whole persona is that she's kind of tough, and she's got like that New York accent. She's got a lot of like confidence and poise. And for the way Lena Huxley is written, she's supposed to kind of be like an airhead, kind of like
ditzy,
kind of a bobblehead, kind of ditzy. Yeah. And I can see how it'd be hard for Lori Petty to come off as that, because she's so calculated in all of her other roles. Where Sandra Bullock, I'm like, oh, that's perfect. She plays that role to a T, in my opinion. So I would say I kind of agree with that one. Like, I think it is a better movie.
Yeah,
because of that casting change.
Yeah, I agree too. I think she is very tough. Like, I feel like Lori Petty can come off as tough, and also, like you mentioned, calculating. And that character, I feel like, needs to be a little bit naive. They need to not know some real things, and that. I don't think that would have fit very well with Lori Petty. Great actress, but I don't think it was a good fit.
Well, I just think about like the helmet sex scene where she has to be like, oh, yeah. I'm like, no, that don't work for me.
No, Why'd you take your helmet off?
Why'd you take your helmet off?
Yeah.
Oh, clipping that. I'm clipping that. Yeah, I mean, that's a film I haven't seen for a long time. But yeah, and like you said, what a role then for Sandra.
Yeah,
because off of that, she gets speed, and from there, it's just, only uphill.
Yeah. No, again, not one. You see, this is why I knew having you two on for this would be good, because I'm learning so much here. Antonio.
Okay, so this is an interesting one. This one goes back to like the 98 to 2000 years, and that was Mary Herron's film American Psycho. Essentially the movie that people started taking Christian Bale seriously as a dramatic actor and not like a Disney actor or a child actor. He brings charm and menace, and it's to this day probably one of his most memorable roles. This one's an interesting change because Christian Bale actually got cast twice in this movie. So, Mary Herron was an independent film director. She had just made a movie that 2 years earlier called I Shot Andy Warhol, which was getting a lot of attention at Sundance, and she wanted to do American Psycho, which is fascinating because that's a very male-driven story from a very male-driven writer. And here we have Mary Herron, a female director, and her writing partner wrote a film called Go Fish, which was a lesbian drama in the 90s. So you have a lesbian woman writing a male kind of sick fantasy movie. And I think that's one of the reasons why that movie works so well. Their first choice, their first casting decision with Lionsgate was Christian Bale. So Christian Bale's like, sweet, I got the part. I'm going to go start working out and be buff Christian Bale for this movie. However, Lionsgate also did a movie a few years earlier with Leonardo DiCaprio called Basketball Diaries. Yeah. And now that he's a big star, he had just done Titanic and Romeo and Juliet. He was like, well, now I kind of want to go back to my indie roots. And he saw that the script was out there. So he put his name in a hat. And essentially they're like, okay, well, pay out Christian Bale. We're firing him. We're going to put Leo in this movie. So for like right? So solid several months, they had Leo in this role cast. And then they're like, well, Leo doesn't want to do it now because the script kind of like taints this image that they've built with him. But they offered him $20 million. And the thing that pissed Mary Herron off about this is that they didn't tell her. They just made the decision to do it. So she's like, well, then I'm not going to do this movie. you're gonna have to like replace me, replace the script. And pretty much what happened with this is that it fell into development hell. No one could make an agreement. And Leo's like, well, I've got The Beach coming up with Danny Boyle. So if you guys don't make this decision right now, I'm leaving. And so he left. And then they begged Christian Bale to come back. And he's like, I'm only coming back if Mary Herron's coming back. And they did. Everyone shook hands and played nice and gave us American Psycho, which to me is still one of the most talked about and most controversial movies ever made. And it's just fantastic. And I can't see anyone but Christian Bale playing that role of Patrick Bateman.
So say you don't get Batman without Bateman. That's the saying, man, out in the streets.
Again.
Yeah, man. You know, I agree. That's a big one, man. I remember when I first heard about that, I was like, yeah, 20 mil, and then also Leo to play that role. I just maybe Leo from when he was already a little more seasoned might have worked, but I don't know at that time.
I've been thinking about it too, because like Leo has never been known for his physical prowess, right? He's always had like that kind of pretty boy charm, a little effeminate. I don't think I've ever seen like a six pack on him ever. But then Christian Bale in that movie is like just a horse. Like he is just built.
Yes.
He is ripped. You know, he's got to be naked in the sauna. He's got to be naked in the sunbed. I don't think that Leo would have had that kind of machismo that was convincing women to go to his apartment. He's more about the charm and the good looks and like that, you know, kind of pretty boy style, where Bateman needs to be aggressive, and that's how he can be dominant over these women who seem to be like very powerful and independent women, and then he just flips the switch and he's, you know, a psycho.
Yeah, definitely.
And I just feel Bale can be terrifying at any point in any time.
Yeah.
That was actually one of my examples, so that's why I knew I'd heard that one, because now I've just had to delete it off my notes. No, but it is a fascinating one, isn't it? In the sense of, first choice isn't there, grab someone, first choice becomes available, get him, and then you go back to the original. I mean, it was lucky that Bale was keeping himself in shape, really, wasn't he?
Indeed.
Yeah, for sure. I guess I think he literally would do everything that his character does in that movie, like even when they weren't filming, to kind of stay in character.
Okay, excellent. So what I'm going to do actually, Cesar, I'm going to go back over to you now while I quickly go through my other examples and get one.
All right, I'm going to go animated with this one. I don't know if Antonio's heard of the Shrek recasting.
Mm-hmm.
The Green Ogre Shrek, one of Mike Myers' most recognizable movie roles. I think most people know him playing that role of Shrek. Originally, Chris Farley was cast to do the voice of Shrek.
Really?
So it was going to be a vehicle for him, and he actually recorded almost all of the dialogue. I think 80 to 90% of it, and then he died. So unfortunately, I don't know if would you guys want to hear or see a movie with Farley playing Shrek? Like that's
I've seen the animatics of it. Like I've heard the voice and I've seen the animatics of it with him and Eddie Murphy, and it's really, really different. It's really different. He's literally just speaking like himself. He doesn't use the Scottish brogue. In fact, they didn't want Myers to use the Scottish accent.
Right.
He just kept on doing it and wouldn't stop. So eventually they're like, okay, well, I guess this is just Shrek now. Because, the original example of Chris Farley, and even the ogre itself looked more like Chris Farley in the original animation of it.
That one is interesting to me because it's kind of like I don't know. We there is franchises, I guess, a lot of these involved. But I don't know if there would be a franchise of Shrek without Mike Myers doing that role.
Yeah, and you say it was about 90% complete, did you?
Yeah, and he passed away like in late 97 or early 98, and we didn't get Shrek until 2001, I think. So there was still another 3 or 4 years of development and animation. And by the time that rolls around, things like The Matrix happened and other things happened, so they could put more culturally relevant material into Shrek. But yeah, that project was dormant for a while until they finally got everything put together. So that could have been a movie that just would have disappeared.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's funny because when you first said that, C's about animated, I thought, that sounds about funny. How do you? But then, you get back the voice characters, and they are, the voice acting is absolutely proper characterization, personalization. So yeah, I guess do wonder in the voiceover world if it's probably more prevalent than we think as well, where it just doesn't work with maybe someone's take on a character. Like you said, Mike Myers initially was playing it Scottish. Could they have got so annoyed that they say, "All right, if that's how you're going to play it, we'll get someone else in"?
Yeah, it could have definitely,
Right.
yeah, for sure.
Antonio, have you got any others?
Yeah, I'll do one last one to kind of just round things out since we've kind of been in comic book land. I had a bunch on my list, but I'm going to go with the ones that made huge, significant changes to the franchise, not just like, oh, they just switched a character or switched an actor. I'm assuming C's knows all about this, but the Wolverine debacle.
Oh, yes.
So there's so much legend and lore behind the casting process of Wolverine. So when I believe it was Canon Films, they had Marvel rights in the 80s and early 90s, and they were thinking about making an X-Men movie, and they wanted Mel Gibson for Wolverine. That never came together. As it started showing more promise into the late 90s, Bryan Singer getting a hold of the rights to direct it, his first pick was Russell Crowe. And Russell Crowe was doing Gladiator at the time. Like, he was training for it. He's like, no, this is my thing. He had just gained so much weight for The Insider, now had to lose it all and get muscular for Gladiator. He said, no, but how about my Australian buddy who's, a song and dance man, but he's in shape. He looks good. His name's Hugh Jackman. And Singer wasn't really sold on it. He's like, I kind of want someone who's already got a name and a face in the industry. Hugh Jackman's a theater guy. We're not going to go with him. Instead, they went with a Scottish actor named Dougray Scott. Now, I like this guy. I've always liked him. Most people would have known him from being like the Prince Charming character in Ever After, the Drew Barrymore Cinderella movie.
That's right. Yeah.
Mission Impossible is why he's not Wolverine. So the problem with Mission Impossible 2 is this is when Tom Cruise is like probably at his most crazy at the time, where he's doing all his own stunts for the first time. He's getting like this really crazy ego. He's huge in Scientology before he is what he is now. Like, he's getting a lot of people essentially blowing smoke up his ass. He's got John Woo, who's already a perfectionist, directing Mission Impossible 2. And they've got Dougray Scott as the bad guy. So Dougray Scott's supposed to go right from Mission Impossible 2 directly into filming X-Men as Wolverine. He's cast, he's paid, he's ready to go. Mission Impossible 2 goes 6 months over schedule. And because of his contract and reshoots, they won't let him go. And so Fox Studio won't wait for Dougray Scott to come back as Wolverine. So they go back with their plan B, which was Hugh Jackman, who nobody knows. No one knows who Hugh Jackman is. And Dougray Scott's like, someone fire me off of Mission Impossible 2. I need to be Wolverine. Wolverine is the role. Like, I'm the bad guy in this movie, but Wolverine is like the best character to play. And they didn't do it. They went with Hugh Jackman, and the rest is history. Like, Hugh Jackman will forever be Wolverine. Like, there's huge doubt that they will ever recast Wolverine as anyone but Hugh Jackman. Like, the dude's almost 60 and he's playing Wolverine again in Deadpool 3. Like, talk about missing out on probably one of the biggest opportunities in cinema history.
I'm dying over here the whole time because I'm just like, he's blaming the Doves for that one, right? Like,
I was gonna say they didn't get the Doves to fly on cue, and that's why it went 6 months over schedule.
Oh man, gotta love John Woo, man. No, that one is definitely that one is definitely a famous one. Dougray Scott, like, to play Wolverine.
And just a franchise changer, man. Like, one of the biggest franchises in the world.
Yeah, I mean, he's about to play him again. It's crazy.
Yep.
Yeah, and also that was my last main one that I had as well. So it feels like we were on sync here. I did have one more though, a brief one. I did have that Dennis Hopper was due to play the role that Ed Harris, or I think he did actually start playing the role that Ed Harris played in the Truman Show.
Truman Show.
Yeah, Christoph. Yeah, they shot with him.
Yeah. So I think it was only a matter of a few days. They really didn't like him, I think. And so, yeah, Ed Harris got the role. That's a decent film. And yeah, well, I haven't seen it again for years, but it felt like he was made for that role. So, yeah, Dennis Hopper. I guess, again, similar maybe look back in the day.
Yeah, that's one I've known about that one as well, but I think that's one like I don't. There's almost like this a level of sympathy that character needs to have, or try to empathy that they need to kind of convey across, and I think Ed Harris does that very well in that film. I don't know if Dennis Hopper could do that.
Dennis Hopper is a performer who, I mean, I mad respect for Dennis Hopper, but Dennis Hopper plays best when he's chewing the scenery.
Yeah.
And Christoph has to be like more intelligent and intuitive and empathetic and sympathetic, but also kind of controlling. Like he is the mastermind behind all this. And so I could probably see if they were trying to put Dennis Hopper in the little beret with maybe like a art scene goatee and trying to make him look more intellectual. I sure it looks great on paper, but I'm not convinced that he could play the undertoned dramatics that Ed Harris brings across. Because even though Ed Harris is, in a sense, he's like playing God, right? Like he's controlling this man's universe. It's not with a lack of compassion and empathy and sympathy towards Truman, and that's what does make that relationship work. The fact that these two characters never even meet each other or see each other throughout the whole film, there is like a relationship between them that is palpable. You can feel it, you know.
Right.
I'm not sure you could get away with that with Dennis Hopper.
Yeah, picture Dennis Hopper from Land of the
Blue
Dead.
Velvet.
Land of the Dead.
Oh, I was gonna be like,
like with a walkie-talkie in his hand and at the top of Fiddler's Green, telling telling Jim Carrey what to do. Yeah, I don't know if it would have worked. I want to mention one hypothetical, and I know we're not talking about those, but I'm curious to see what Antonio thinks and what you might think, Dan, about the offer for Peter Cushing or Christopher Lee to play Dr. Loomis. What do you guys think about that?
It works. It works for me. I would have said I would have much rather seen Peter Cushing than Christopher Lee. Loomis can't be too menacing, and that's why I think Donald Pleasance works so great in it, is because, like, yeah, he's definitely off kilter, but he's not menacing. Peter Cushing can play less menacing, but I don't think Christopher Lee can play anything but menacing. So, yeah, interesting, but I think they did right with how they did it.
I agree. Yeah. That's the only one I feel like sometimes that'll give me pause when I think about it.
Like the what if?
Yeah, the what if.
Dan, do you have any more? Because we can finish with what I think might be the most famous one.
I had one what if, but have you actually got a replacement? Sorry.
You skipped one, so you should do it, and I'll
Yeah,
just
go ahead.
do mine as the honorable mention at the
It's
end.
always a guess, so you go first.
Well, I think the most famous one, in my opinion, is the Tom Selleck could have been Indiana Jones rather than Harrison Ford, and very much like Michael J. Fox. It was all about TV contracts.
Yep.
It was Tom Selleck's role. It was his role. He did all the screen testing with the actresses. He would have kept the mustache. And Harrison Ford literally was like a last-minute replacement when he could not get out of his Magnum PI TV contract. So there is a world out there where Magnum PI would have been Indiana Jones. And I got to tell you, I don't hate it at all, but it's really hard when you have an iconic character like Indiana Jones. And the reason why he's so iconic is because Harrison Ford played him the way he did. That's a tough one.
Yeah. Oh man, that one is hard because I like Tom Selleck, but like, yeah, it's so iconic. Those are one of those, and it depends what your flavor is. Like, what do you like?
Right.
Like, you like the ground beef coming out the chest, or with the mustache, or the suave guy with the whip.
I think what you said, Antonio, is right. Harrison Ford had the traits that made the Indiana Jones character so watchable and so likable. But also at the time, Selleck was doing a great role as Magnum as well. It's not like he wasn't portraying a good character in his own right anyway. So I think it kind of worked out for both of them in the end.
Yeah, I would agree. It's just a very interesting, like, what if, like Caesar was saying.
Yeah. I just had one what if, or I think they wanted him in the role, but he just couldn't at the time. But it was Michael Madsen was the first choice for the role of Vincent Vega before John Travolta got it. So I'm thinking, how would you see that? You look at that, and Travolta just played, that's an iconic role he had in performance. So what would you see about that?
You're going down a rabbit hole
Yeah.
on this one, Dan, because
they're cousins. No, I'm just kidding.
that's the thing is like the original idea is that Michael Madsen would have played Vincent Vega as a twin of Vic Vega
Yeah.
from Reservoir Dogs. So Tarantino had this trilogy planned where Reservoir Dogs is an introduction to Mr. Blonde, aka Vic Vega. Then he would have played his twin brother Vincent in Pulp Fiction, and then afterwards there would have been a movie where they played the twins together, and that movie was called The Vega Brothers. There was a script. It's something that Quentin really wanted to do, but Pulp Fiction became so huge that it overshadowed what it would have been. And so that's where it does kind of get a little squishy, is that the whole reason why Madsen didn't do Pulp Fiction is because he got offered a lot more money to do Wyatt Earp to play Kevin Costner's brother. So he went with the money, and then that movie ended up being dog shit. And he's like, I should have stuck to playing that character, because Quentin wrote it for him. Quentin wrote him as a twin. So again, that's the rabbit hole.
Yeah, fascinating. See, your view on that?
I agree. That's like when Antonio said a rabbit hole, that's exactly what it is. Because
yeah, I saw your face. Yeah.
You like, even let's say you're not as much a fan of film or cinema or Quentin Tarantino or his movies, but you've seen a few of them, you would notice that some of those character names are similar. So you would notice that there's some connecting tissue here. There's a larger idea of a universe possibly being built off of, those characters. So I think that is something that most people that are fans, super fans, especially of his stuff, they would know, but your layman person might not pay as much attention to it. But I think that's definitely would be something cool if that would have went through. But again, I mean, I kind of like Travolta as, Vincent Vega.
Yeah.
So
I doubt Madsen can dance as well as Travolta, especially when you go back to the Stuck in the Middle with You, cutting off the ear scene, the little dance he does when he slices the cop's ear off. If that's what we were going to get in the Jackrabbit Slim scene, then no, I think Travolta was the right choice.
There you go. Were there any other shout outs from either of you before we wrap up?
There's plenty, but we might even do like a follow-up episode.
Maybe we could do that.
There's a lot. Yeah, I agree. Definitely.
Okay. As we were doing this episode, I had a thought that I'm kicking myself. I didn't do it beforehand, but what I should have got is somebody else, another podcaster, to record a segment of me asking you questions, so I could have changed the casting of me halfway through this episode. I think that would have worked well, and I'm kicking myself. So I absolutely want to do a second episode, and we'll do that.
I'm going to recast with Justin.
yeah, absolutely.
Right. He's just taking over all the pods.
Yeah. Right, look, thank you both for giving me an hour of your time tonight to do this. It's been brilliant talking to you. Cease, do you just want to shout out your pod and the socials again before we go?
Sure. So you can listen to my podcast, the No on 15 Allcast, wherever you listen to your podcast. You can find us on all social media, TikTok, Twitter, X, and Instagram, all that good stuff. And yeah, we're wrapping up the season. We got probably another 6 or 7 episodes to go. And then, yeah, that'll be it for season 4.
And Antonio.
Oh, you know me. You can find all my stuff on thecultworthy.com. All my shows. That would be the Cultworthy Cinema Podcast, the Cultworthy Classic, the Milf and Me, and the soon-to-be 4th podcast with my co-host Justin Henson. And I'm on all the socials too. DM me on Instagram and Twitter is where I'm the most active. But yeah, man, it's always a pleasure to be on your show and have you on mine. And yeah, we owe each other another Brit Grit crime episode on my show. So let's start talking about that soon.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to doing that. Yeah, absolutely. So please do, if you're not, subscribe to the shows there that I've mentioned. Like I've said before, not only are they great shows, but these two people are just fantastic people. So yeah, you're doing a wonderful thing just by following them for that. So for me, you're listening to this, so hopefully you should know where to find me. But in terms of socials, just look for Casting Views across all of them. And yeah, if you want to be on the show, suggest an idea or just say hi, yeah, drop me a note anywhere you find me there. So I will see you next week.
2, 3, 4.
If I want your opinion, I will give it to you. Come on, check what we got, 'cause you need it. Don't make us get